David, I'm bringing you in. Sir, for those who don't know who you are, so they can be satisfied with your credentials and how you came to be where you are in terms of the Tina Peters trial.
Yeah, Cliff Notes version. I'm one of the new canceled people out there. I was a former law professor. I had subject matter expertise in consumer protection, so the jab and all things mandate related crossed my doorstep. And before that, I was a longtime prosecutor, and I decided to talk about the two things that you're just not allowed to talk about, which are elections and COVID. After a few years of doing that, if you Google my name, nothing nice is being written about me, but I try to stand with other whistleblowers and courageous people, and Tina Peters is certainly that.
So you were a prosecutor for how many years?
For about a decade.
Wow. Out of Colorado?
New Mexico. So Lincoln County, home of Billy the Kid. I oversaw 6 law enforcement agencies. So if there was a felony that was going to be charged, it had to cross my desk. And I spent some time in 3 or 4 of the border counties here. So right here, dealing with drug trafficking. So I was on the other side. I was actually, I thought someone that was wearing the white hat going after bad guys. And then 2020 happened.
How did you get involved in Tina's case, or not in it, but you've been following it, you watched the trial, you've been commentating on it, so you're intimately familiar with all of the details?
I am. Well, actually, I was the person at the first cyber symposium. I was on stage when Tina decided to become a whistleblower. So there was this pivotal moment in 2021 after she had taken a forensic image of the election management system that she was the custodian for. And we ended up finding all kinds of deviations and alterations of election records. And so that was a pivotal moment where I got to know Tina. I got involved in the election integrity movement early on and have worked with people. We put out a documentary called Let My People Go. And so we've done audits, we've done canvasses, we've done examination of Dominion machines in my own state. And so you can't be knowledgeable about what's going on in election integrity without coming across Tina's story, because the Mesa images that were taken under her control and custody, there's so few people that had access to kind of the digital side of things. And so, like anyone that's interested in elections, we wanted to look at the Mesa reports. We wanted to look at the claims that were being made. We wanted to have our own experts look at her work. 3 years later, all of the findings that were in the Mesa reports still check out. They haven't been debunked. They haven't been, rebuked by anyone with serious credentials. Dr. Walter Doherty and Jeff O'Donnell were the 2 experts that basically looked at the systems, and they saw that about 29,000 election records were either deleted or altered. And that's really what drew me to Tina's involvement in the election integrity movement.
And now, just so people appreciate, this is Mesa County in Colorado, not Mesa in Arizona. Some people might be not confused, but confounding the two, which makes this even more understandable in terms of the political nature of this. Colorado is Jenna Griswold's territory, where they tried to bump Trump from the ballot on the 14th Amendment issue. Corrupt as corrupt can be. What did Tina allegedly uncover by way of anomalies in the election or Dominion system out of Colorado? Because it wasn't vote flipping, from what I understand, but what did she observe, and what was she blowing the whistle on in her mind?
Well, things were brought to our attention about whether the Dominion systems were connected to the internet, or that they could be breached. As a clerk who really just wanted to put the rumors to rest, she's like, I'm tired of people accusing my office of, being in on some, election conspiracy. So she decided to have an expert take a forensic image of the election management system. And that's what she was the custodian of in Mesa County before Dominion came in and performed what's known as a trusted build. And then they took a second image after the trusted build. And when they compared them, that's where they found alteration of records, deletion of records that are supposed to be maintained under the law. But that was basically the gravamen of what she was dealing with. Was, all right, let's see if there's anything wrong here. And she was getting all kinds of directives from the Secretary of State. Don't you dare preserve those records, at least not in a way that was satisfactory under the law. There is a code under federal law 52 USC 20701, which requires retention of all records, digital, paper, you name it. And Colorado has the same equivalent. And that responsibility is thrust upon Tina and Tina alone. It's not something that someone else can satisfy.
Okay, and now she is or was a Colorado clerk. What was that, a full-time employment, or was that strictly for the election? And what does that imply by way of obligations and duties?
Yeah, so Tina Peters was an elected official. She was for Mesa County effectively the custodian of all things related to elections. So she had the authority to look at systems to make sure they weren't being breached. So someone that's on the ballot who had a public trust legally with the people of Mesa to ensure that their votes were accurate and honest, that the methods and processes were transparent.
Is that a full-time job in between elections, or is it specifically for the election that she was elected?
Well, it's a full-time job. The clerks, while there's only a handful of elections, whether it's the primary, the general, there's still a 9 to 5 component of getting prepared, doing logic and accuracy tests, doing post audits of that nature.
So official function, elected function by way of overseeing or participating in the carrying out of elections, leading up to the forensic imaging of the system itself, which we'll get into. Specific concerns or allegations that were being brought to Tina Peters' attention were what?
Well, I think it was similar to what we heard everywhere. Like after November 3rd, 2020, people were wanting to look at records or paper ballots to see if there's something wrong. I'm not suggesting that Tina had a full understanding of the different ways of subversion, but experts were bringing deviations to our attention that potentially violated the state law of Colorado and federal law. And the only way that you can figure it out is to actually get those records. That's why getting the forensic image of her election system was so vital. So there are many experts across the country that saw anomalies in this thing called a cast vote record summary, which evidenced a PID controller. And basically, for folks that don't know what a PID controller is, anyone that's ever used cruise control in their car or used a thermostat on the wall, there's a set point that something is trying to get to. And when you looked at the records in a certain way, we found out there was a linear drive of how votes were being cast that were reaching towards a predetermined set point. We saw that in over 300 counties across the country. Election night reporting, we saw similar algorithms that defied what you would expect out of a normal data set. And so these are the types of things that people will want to scrutinize and look at. And part of your inventory of doing audits would necessarily include looking at an election management system, the system log files, whether something had breached. How can you account for these predetermined set points without looking at the machinery? And I think that's where people became more and more curious, asking for the clerk to say, hey, look, they're public records that you can request under the law. Let us examine them and see if something is wrong in Mesa County. Well, she did that. And sure enough, when the experts started looking at that forensic image, they found out that there's a creation of 2 new databases that weren't there before. And when they started doing a reconciliation between the initial forensic image and compared it to what happened after Dominion got their hands on it, they found that entire project files were deleted. Things were altered. The numbers couldn't be reconciled. So that's consistent with, fraud. And so at that point, there was just this great kind of flash mob conviction where she went from being a gold starred mom of a son who died serving his country, someone that was the gold standard in Colorado. She was loved by everyone, to being public enemy number 1 because she dared to tell the truth.
To put it broadly, the same concerns they had seen everywhere. Some of them were, I'd say, more or less substantiated than other concerns. The vote flipping was one. One of the concerns raised, which may or may not have panned out, to hold water. But they come to her, and does she go to higher ups and say, can we do something of a formal analysis audit? And they say no, or does she, for lack of a better term, take the law into her own hands?
Well, it depends on which law you want to look at. Now, the SOS certainly wanted everything in the hands of the vendors. And so this would be Dominion reps. But once you've been put on notice that the vendors themselves are potentially violating your law by deleting election files, she's got a fiduciary responsibility to protect those records. And that's why she brought in someone that was independent by the name of Conan Hayes. She had an IT representative that was local by the name of Gerald Wood. And those were the 2 people that were responsible for procuring the forensic image. Now, obviously, people from Dominion, the SOS office, didn't want that to happen. But oddly, they also would not send an IT official from their own office to be there under public scrutiny. And so there was kind of this dance that they were doing that no one really wanted her to get the image done in a public, transparent way. What I can tell you is that the law requires, under Colorado law, it's 17804, and again, federal law 52 USC 20701, there's a legal requirement that all election records be preserved. she was not allowed to present that defense in her trial. Instead, what they did is they constructed a bunch of kind of duplicative charges like criminal impersonation, conspiracy to commit criminal impersonation, influencing a public servant. And basically, this was all around, you know, this idea or notion that when she brought in this outside IT expert, because they weren't following the explicit directives from the Secretary of State's office, that was tantamount to deception. There was an improper influencing of, I guess, what they wanted done. It's really weird the way that they constructed the prosecution against her, because if she did something wrong, if she breached the system, there are charges that are actually much more on the nose than what she was charged with. Instead, you're basically looking at corruption issues. The people that are claiming corruption were all members of the Secretary of State's office, basically saying you have to do it this way, even though the law does not declare that you have to do it the way that they're directing. In fact, the law is explicit that Tina actually has the authority, not the SOS.
It's amazing. So she would have had to, or did go to the SOS, who is it's Jenna Griswold at the time, right? This is 2020, but we all now know who Jenna Griswold is, as if she would have ever done anything to show that or if Trump in fact should have or ought to have won in Colorado. Okay, so let's just say she gets stonewalled, or there's no meaningful progress on her requests to do what she thinks is required to verify the accuracy and legitimacy of the election. Tell us how she goes about, in as much as you're able to. Like, what is being forensically imaged, and who does she get to do it? How does she get to do it? How do they get access to it?
So the forensic image is basically a bit for bit clone of exactly what was on the hardware at the time. You know, you basically have a copy or clone of everything that was there. So once you get that forensic image, it's like you're accessing the system as it existed at that time. So all of the menus, all of the drop-down files, everything that was in the system logs would have been visible to experts to take a look at. As far as the irony here, it's odd, Viva, because if she had turned a blind eye and did not take efforts to make a forensic image, a law enforcement official could have gone after her for that. So if she would have stood by and had knowledge that the trusted build being performed by Dominion was going to delete system log files or project files, there would have been a basis to go after her under the law. And so that's why this is such a kind of duplicitous situation, is that she's damned if she does, she's damned if she doesn't.
She would only have to bank on the fact that no one would ever damn her for not doing it, because what they wanted in theory was the outcome to be a certain way. And so they would never have investigated whatever chicanery went about that would have otherwise been sanctionable.